In today's episode, we sit down with Kate Hartley, a local attorney who has taken the fight for free speech, freedom of religion, and parental rights right here in Idaho. Hot topic. Let's go. You're starting to learn, Dave.
I am.
I'm really proud.
I'm tired of waiting for you to press the button.
Button has been pressed. All right, we've got Kate Hartley with us today. Welcome to the North Idaho Experience, by the way. I should also say we are on all audio platforms. You can find us on other platforms. We're out there. So
they rhyme with Bumble. Not the app Bumble. We're not on the app Bumble. But it rhymes with Bumble.
I don't even know what that is, but it sounds dangerous. Kate is an attorney, and she works with the Pacific Justice Institute, which is a nonprofit. Today, we're going to talk about free speech. We're going to talk about parental rights. Some of this is probably going to get the old snip. So if you want the full version, you know where to find us elsewhere. But let's jump right in. So thank you for joining us. I'm very excited about this conversation. You've got two former cops and an attorney in a room. Who knows what's going to happen? We've been getting along famously so well, so far. So that's good. The free speech thing, this came up. A friend of mine actually connected me with Kate. It really started because, and do you even know about this?
I didn't.
The Cross Ban downtown Coeur d'Alene.
I heard something about it, but dude, rumors are just
right.
They flood
we
social
have
media.
Someone in the room that has probably a lot of good insight on that. So if we can dive into that first, and I'm talking about, was it the 4th of July parade?
It was.
Yeah.
Yes. So the 4th of July parade downtown Coeur d'Alene is put on by the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce, has been for years. And they issued some new rules this year before the parade for all people who were entering, afloat in the parade, that no religious symbols were allowed, no political symbols were allowed. They had a list of rules. And so the thing that got most people's attention right off the bat was no religious symbols, because many different floats were either sponsored by churches or had some kind of connection to religion. And that was obviously going to be a part of their float, of their expression during the parade. So this became a really big issue. And of course, my phone blew up when these rules were issued. What can we do about this? This has to be illegal. And the reality is, and this was actually a really good opportunity to explain this to a lot of different people who contacted me, and I'm sure other people as well. Chamber of Commerce is a private entity, right? So it's not the government, and constitutional issues, are only there related to government, right? So the government cannot suppress your speech, can't suppress your freedom of religion, but a private entity can, right? And ultimately that's a good thing, because when we are the private entity and we want to censor something that we don't believe in or we don't like, we want to have that ability, right? So that was the reality of the situation, right? And so from a legal standpoint. And then, of course, there is the court of public opinion, which is a totally separate issue. And ultimately, for people who don't know, the community, really people all over the state were sending messages to the Chamber of Commerce saying, please allow, people to have these religious symbols and have this religious expression. It's an important part of our country's heritage, celebrating the 4th of July. It was part of our nation's founding, and it's appropriate, right, for this holiday and this parade. And so lots and lots and lots of pressure were put on the Chamber of Commerce. And ultimately, at the last minute, they did change their rules and allowed for it.
You know what? How does that, that affects the community too, because when you talk about doing floats, you're talking about people being able to express, you think of small business. We're always big on small business. Like, how is it that is a good thing for the community when now all of a sudden you're suppressing people from not just their beliefs, but being able to represent who they are and how they are ingrained in the community? Ultimately you build a float, it's advertisement for you, but it's also showing that you're involved in the community. So now to suppress that and say, well, you can't have that on there. Well, what religious thing? Can we say that we're a church? Can we say that we have, what exactly? I don't think that's beneficial to everybody.
No. And I guess maybe I can slightly understand their initial reasoning, right? They're trying to reduce conflict or something, because if you allow one religious symbol, then you need to allow them all. So if someone wants to get up there with a Satan worshiping float, well, we don't agree with that. We would in theory have to let them express their beliefs as well.
Sure. But that's what it's all about, right? I mean,
It
people
is.
like that, they don't survive in an environment. I mean, maybe they do something that riles people up. I mean, you see it. I mean, let's just talk about politics.
Yeah.
I mean, you see the Kootenai County Republicans or some sort of conservative movement come down on a parade and everybody's cheering.
Yep.
And then you see the Idaho Democrats come down and just gets super silent.
Yep.
Everybody just sits there and
Back to the court of public opinion right there.
The other thing about that is, you can make anything religious and you can make anything political. Right. And so the vagueness of a type of a rule like that, and really if it was a government entity, it would be unconstitutional for vagueness, right? Because, well, what does that mean? Especially now, what isn't political? What can you not make political? What can you not make religious? I mean, that can truly encompass everything if you think about it. Does that mean the political candidate can't be part of a float, or, even an active, politician locally? What does it mean? Everything is political.
We're afraid of conflict nowadays. And the truth is that that's what helps you define who you are. We've gone away from this, let's make sure everybody's happy and everybody's taken care of. That's not how people turn into who they are, right? Like it allows people, it forces suppression on people, when realistically conflict is a good thing. That's how you determine, where do I stand in this? I mean, so I don't know why that's always such a big push.
There was a pecking order and things were kept in place. And I think that pecking order is gone. And that's just a microcosm of what's going on in the whole country, unfortunately.
Yep.
So is free speech under attack or what? That's a big question, I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nationwide. And I think that there, is going to be an increasing push to suppress, free speech. I mean, you were mentioning you're still getting censored on for certain things. I mean, that is out there.
Yep.
It's still out there. I think it's growing. It's a growing problem that we are seeing really everywhere, whether that's in schools, on social media platforms. And again, social media platforms are not government, so it doesn't implicate First Amendment necessarily, but just this idea of, certain things are misinformation, or certain things are not okay to be out there, which is definitely not the spirit of, our Constitution and what we were founded on at all.
I saw a news article yesterday. I can't remember. It was one of the woke news agencies, but it was saying how they were insinuating that the Constitution is the problem and that we should redo it.
Wow.
And I feel like people are going to believe that, right? The people that are spoon-fed their information from corporate control media, they're going to buy into that. They're like, yeah, we should do that. That's right. That's where we're going to see a big conflict in the country, because there are plenty of people out there that will stand for the Constitution, because I think it's an important document. I don't know. Like, where's that go?
I don't know. It's frightening. I mean, and we've seen obviously a lot of that happening even just increasingly over the last several years, right? As we all know. And depending on what happens in November, and I mean, the direction, the country will go, it could get a lot worse.
Yeah.
I think that could very well be in our future.
So going back to that too, with the floats where we started at, so it was titled, "We've Banned Crosses." Obviously that was just a headline, right? It wasn't
religious symbols. Yeah.
Right. I mean, but you hear, we banned crosses. And I think that's what probably riled most people up here in North Idaho, because this is a very conservative Christian community. So when you say, we're banning crosses, all of a sudden everybody's like, all right, we're having a crusade. Like, what is going on? Yeah. So I think that's one of those things too. And I that's the media twisting things to where it's not really, you take what it sounds like the Chamber of Commerce was trying to do to say, hey, we don't want the conflict, whatever else, which I disagree with. However, if it would have said, we're banning any Islamic symbols, you probably wouldn't hear hardly a peep up here, right? Just because there's not a huge Islamic influence up here, even though that should be protected as well under the First Amendment. So,
correct. Yeah.
But I'm interested just how that stuff gits flung around that we're banning crosses.
Right, because that's how I heard it. Yeah,
Right.
I think I even saw a headline somewhere like crosses banned in Coeur.
Yeah, I saw it on
that
Facebook.
Yeah.
sparked me. I was like, what? And I
Yeah.
didn't even know the
Mhm.
Chamber of Commerce side of it and how it was a private entity. I had no idea. I just assumed it was the city doing it.
Yeah.
Of course, right? Well, as most people probably did.
Mhm.
And
My phone blew up
Oh,
when
no.
that happened.
Yeah.
What's going on? Explain this. So, I mean, it was a good thing to explain it, right? And so I want people to understand, you know, where that line between government, private entities is, because it's an important thing for people to understand.
Yeah.
How's the pressure on that? When you get
Mhm.
calls like that, I mean, it sounds like you almost have to put down the phone for a minute and be like, hold on, because there's a lot of research you have to do to make sure that you have the information correct for people.
Many times that's true. Absolutely. Like anybody, I don't always know the answer to everything, right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Anyone who says that they do is lying.
Yes.
Research has to be done. Something like that, you know, I was pretty aware of what was going on and was able to talk to people right away about that.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, and I get it. People were very upset. You know, when are we going to sue the city for doing this? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, this isn't the city, you know? Now there's a caveat to that. If the government entity is putting pressure on the private entity to do something, that's a different animal, because then the government is working to suppress speech, which they cannot do. But when you're talking a pure private entity, they can censor, right? They have a right to censor. And the way I tried to communicate that to everyone is that we want it that way, right? Because when we're the ones running the parade or whatever, you know, whatever activity it is, we want to be able to control the speech as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
How did you get into this line of work? How long have you been an attorney? Have you always been doing this, or did you start somewhere else?
It's a great question. I actually was a nurse for many years. So started off in
we all get
healthcare.
along. It wasn't it's the nurse background.
So I was working in healthcare, and I started to notice within healthcare a total lack of knowledge of the law. And so that's actually why I went to law school, and to go specifically into healthcare specific issues, which I did for a number of years. And I started seeing these constitutional issues come up within the healthcare setting and with my healthcare clients. And so that's actually how I started getting into this area. You know, I had questions asked of me, you know, am I allowed to say this at work? You know, again, from healthcare people, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to refuse to participate in something I disagree with? And so I started getting those questions. And so started giving myself a crash course in some of these, you know, constitutional Title VII implications. And that's ultimately how I kind of organically got into this area. And really still represent a lot of healthcare people, because these issues are prevalent in medicine.
So you just like to go to school is what it is.
Is there a way to get rid of HIPAA, by the way?
I'm done forever. I'm not doing more school.
We'll see.
Done with school.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay. So then did you immediately jump into working for the Pacific Justice Institute?
I started doing a little bit of this on my own before that. And then hopped into working for Pacific Justice Institute.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were never a defense attorney. I'm just trying to get there as well. I'm just kidding.
No. Yes,
Just
we
kidding.
do almost all plaintiff work. Yes.
Cool. And what is the scope of what that institute does?
So we do religious freedom, free speech, parental rights primarily. Again, religious freedom is a pretty big area that encompasses not only the First Amendment, but Title VII, which is employment discrimination at the federal level. Obviously, at the state level, do the same thing. That can be property rights, you know, for religious groups or churches, things like that. So that's pretty all-encompassing area. Around here, you know, I have a lot of free speech cases in Idaho. And again, Title VII, discrimination on the basis of religion primarily.
So I got something maybe conflictual for us. So First Amendment auditors.
What
Okay.
is that? I don't even know what that is.
So
I don't
First
either.
Amendment auditor. So you ever watch YouTube or you
No.
see it on Instagram where somebody approaches law enforcement, they're filming, they're doing whatever, you know what I mean? And we call them First Amendment auditors.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I had another name for them. I won't say.
But you know, you get these people, you see it online all the time. A lot of times they're posting things like cop gets, you know, they jack up a cop or whatever else. But you see them come out and they're really there just to pick a fight. I mean, they're a frustrating, you get a call, hey, there's this person filming me and kids down at the park. And you're like, oh man. And you go to that and you know exactly what type of call that's going to be, right? You show up.
You mean call to a cop?
Yeah. Yep.
Got it.
Law enforcement, right?
Got
hey,
it. Okay.
This guy's down here filming my kids at the park.
Okay.
And we're like, okay, here we go. And you show up and the first thing, the guy turns the camera on you. They're just waiting for somebody to get there. Am I doing something wrong, officer? Well, look, some people were concerned. Am I doing something wrong? What's your badge number? And you're like, that's so in a lot of and you see these videos posted all over the place. And you know, they claim, hey, it's free speech, it's freedom, it's my right to come out here and do this, and I'm, you know, and freedom of the press, whatever else, they're all doing their thing. Do you ever deal with people that have cases like that or try to push those cases?
I have not personally. Okay. No. Yeah, that's obviously not in the spirit of what we should be doing, right? I mean, it's
a phenomenal waste of time. It is a setup.
Yeah. I think that's what I wanted to
versus actual suppression and censorship, and those types of things.
They're trying to get a reaction. So that they used to come into this is probably like 2018, 2019. I don't even know what started it, but it became all the time. They would come into the front office at our station, and they'd be filming the whole, right away when they come in, you're like, oh, damn it.
Yeah, they're coming and filming the station.
Yeah, and they do public information requests, but they would request like ridiculous things, like I want a copy of every ticket written in the last year. It's like, okay, that's 10,000 tickets. Now you're going to tie up, and we had to comply. Now you're going to tie up an office staff for days to provide this information, which won't show you shit.
And you're going to throw in the trash anyways.
Exactly. And it was good. We had this crusty old sergeant, Papa Don, and he was getting ready to retire, and he didn't give two shits. And it was hilarious because he'd be like, oh, let me get the sergeant for you. And he'd come up and he would just light them. Not the appropriate response, I'm sure, but it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And, they'd do their thing and film everybody, and nothing would happen out of it.
Those were difficult because, they do some research for sure. I think there's an expectation with law enforcement, like, they'll come up and be like, you don't know what Title VII, you don't know these. Well, look, man, half the time there was times that you had PC on somebody and you're like, all right, I know this is a violation of code. Hold on real quick. Like you have to, you have to go through stuff to see if it meets the criteria, whether or not it's, it's unlawful. And man, you get set up and it's so difficult because they're filming you. They already have their responses. They're ready to go. They've prepped for the dialogue. You haven't.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult when those things happen.
Here's a question. How much training do you guys get as cops in First Amendment law or, local
Not
ordinance?
A lot.
Basic.
Okay.
Yeah. Not a lot.
You go through it, you take a little test. I don't even know how much time you would spend on it. 4-hour block or something.
Okay.
Yeah. Not a ton. Yeah.
Interesting.
But you're also talking about in the training, there's so much to cover that it's like,
absolutely.
It's a lot. It's hard.
Yeah, of course.
So,
and it's just dumb beat cops, man.
Yeah.
Just came here to enforce the law.
Yeah. What do you think the motive is for those people though who do?
I think they go down rabbit holes on YouTube and other places, and they're like, "Oh, it's the same with the constitutionalists. Do you ever deal with them?
No.
Or the people, or sovereign citizens? No. So they are the most annoying thing. They'll have the license plate that says like, I don't even know. Traveler, not for commerce. Like they make up these license plates and they do all this weird research and they think it's legitimate.
Roll down their window this far
and they won't they won't identify themselves.
Hand you papers.
It is infuriating. And you're like, they're causing this thing to escalate. Like I just pulled you over because you were doing 7 over, bro. Like I don't want to go down this road.
Right.
A lot of guys, what it would force a lot of guys to do is they'd be like, I don't even want to deal with this.
Just walk away from it.
Which is not the right response because now you're enforcing that behavior and it's like, oh, so yeah, I won.
Right.
No.
Right.
But a lot of times it would just keep escalating. Like I have probable cause to make a stop.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to identify yourself. Mm-hmm. You're required to. And then, okay, now what? Now we're going to like break the window and now we're going to arrest this guy. Like you dumbass.
It's a terrible situation to be put in. And that's why I brought up the First Amendment auditors, because it's almost like, when Antifa came to town, chief up here did a great job of not putting black and whites and uniformed personnel in the way, right? Because that's where the conflict happened.
Yeah.
Right.
When they went through and they marched and they said their things and they did what they needed to do, which is their right to do, nothing happened. But when there was law enforcement thrown in, then there's a conflict. And it was a chosen conflict. Well, when you weren't there, it was almost like, okay, well, we said what we needed to do. We're out.
Right.
And so that's what it feels like with the First Amendment auditors. You get these people that think they know the Constitution so well.
Yeah.
They think that you have to, what's your badge number? I'm like, bro, that's not even a thing with our department. What are you talking about? You want my employee ID number I get paid on? I'm not sure. Like,
Well, it also minimizes actual First Amendment violations, you know, that are real and that are out there. I mean, that minimizes like the work we do, you know, where this, you know, where there's true suppression of speech in a non-setup manner, you know.
What's the type of stuff that you deal with when you say that there's true suppression? What's like an example of the most common type of suppression that you're seeing that people come to you with?
I think that there's, and as you know, there's a huge divide, right, in the country right now on political beliefs, religious beliefs, and how those intersect.
I haven't noticed.
You know, come on, everyone knows that. And so it's just trying to control the narrative, you know. So you get a school, any government entity who's basically taken a position on something, and then you get people that disagree with that, and they voice that opinion, and then they get punished. Right. So, and again, that comes up in a number of different ways, whether it's, you know, school, work, just this, you must accept our narrative or we're going to, you know, treat you adversely in some way.
Oh, yeah.
And just with the increasing division of thought that we have in this country right now, I think that is why it's coming up more and more. You have, you know, employers that say, this is our stance on this issue, you know, and then you get someone who, I mean, peacefully and again, without causing a problem in the workplace, just expressing their opinion that's adverse to that.
Yep.
And boom, they're fired. They're, you know, whatever it may be. You
know, division and emotion is good for business.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you look at what, you know, whether you agree with it or not, the left side works a lot off of emotion right now. There's a lot of emotional people that, if you were to sit down and have a conversation about a hot topic with somebody that is a hard-sided leftist, this is, you know, there should be no restriction, there's not going to be a conversation that happens. Right. People have lost the emotional intelligence. I talk about emotional intelligence all the time.
Right.
They don't have the ability to converse and have a conversation about it to find out where people truly are. And I think that's one of those things that, you know, First Amendment or rights or Constitution, it becomes very emotional for people. And if you can get somebody emotional, you can get a lot of backing behind it, right?
Yeah.
You can get a lot of backing behind an emotional state.
Right. And then with those emotions, they call someone's peaceful opinion hateful, discriminatory, harassing, you know, pick your adjective, your adjective, you know, and then it just spirals from there and people, you know, get fired for this or kicked out of school or whatever it may be.
Right. Yeah. There's that, that implication that what you're doing is not good for this person. And even though it doesn't affect all these other people, because what you're doing affects this person, we're going to make it to where everybody can't do that. Because that one person or that one event or possibility, and that happens constantly.
Yeah, it does.
You said you're working a case right now. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
What's the scoop?
So we just filed a new lawsuit, free speech lawsuit, based down in Sun Valley, so southern part of the state. So we represent a woman who attended a public pride festival down there. And there was this big, you know, drag show in front of kids involved in that. Okay. And so she goes to this and she just starts talking to people. She goes up to the booths, you know, that were set up at the festival and she just starts having conversation. She actually approached this church booth that was there and just started having a conversation, you know, with them, you know, why do you think this is, you know, okay for kids, and just had a peaceful conversation. They reacted very poorly to that. And they called security, said you need to leave. Okay. And she actually peacefully left. And ultimately the police were called. And so police officer shows up and he approaches the booth and says, oh, I heard some horrible person came and talked to you, you know, tell me about that. And, he goes on and on about how that was inappropriate. She shouldn't be saying anything like that. He tries really hard to find something to cite her for. And again, she's gone, left peacefully. She's not even there anymore. And so he kind of realizes he can't cite her for anything. And so he gets a picture of her license plate number from somebody else.
Oh boy.
And goes to her home.
Oh boy.
And knocks on her door and says, you cannot go back there. You shouldn't have done what you did, and intimidated her, basically.
Was this officer wearing assless chaps at the time? I don't even understand this. Sorry, that was inappropropriate.
Well, and as cops, I mean, what do you guys think about that? I mean, to me, that's like he's intimidating her.
1098, nothing here.
To not, yeah, right. I mean, going to her home.
That's weird.
When she's already left. Again, I understand if she's there, still she never caused a problem. But if it was heated in the moment, I understand. Right. Making sure nothing escalates. But she's gone.
Where's the real victim? Like, where's the real victim? That's what I always look at when I was a cop. Like, if I show up and there's really not a victim, then I'm out. Like you said.
And he determined that before he went to her house. I mean, everyone he interviewed said she wasn't threatening us. She wasn't harassing us. She wasn't vulgar. She wasn't in anything, right? She was just talking to us.
And is this a public place that she's in?
Yes. Public park.
I have an issue with that.
Yeah.
Are we talking about England or the U.S. here? This is wild.
I mean, we just talked about, I admitted it to him the other day, and I feel bad admitting this, hopefully.
I can't wait.
Like, there's times where, like I said, I pulled up on traffic stops with people, and you just get a complete pain in the ass, and it's a 7 over.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, oh my gosh, just have a good day. Like, you don't want to deal with it. You're like, this isn't worth the court time, anything that's going to come of this is just not going to be a useful amount of my time, of the community's time, of anything else. Like, does that mean that every person that complains and whines should get out of a ticket? No. But I mean, there's times where you're like, all right, where is this really? Where's the end game for this? I don't want to be part of this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Just
is it worth it?
Flick the ID back and see ya.
Yeah. So, and what it comes down to is, this cop was siding with one viewpoint essentially over another. Right. Which is not a cop's job, as you know, right? Yep. It's to keep the peace and enforce the law. And this was not that, So we will see what happens with this case.
Yeah. And ultimately that's a call where I'm the type of person like, why did you guys call?
Yeah.
Why do you need law enforcement to be here to handle this issue?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because your feelings got hurt.
Seriously.
That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Yeah. I see a lot of times I'm just the opposite. I'm like, can you please not utilize public resources this way? Yeah. This is I have other things to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So that ended up being a free speech thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we filed, federal case based on First Amendment free speech. It was just filed, so nothing's happened yet. So we'll see where that goes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's going to get smacked. He should get smacked for that.
Mm-hmm. And as you probably know too, cops enjoy a lot of qualified immunity, right? And so that for on our end in this case, that's a big barrier to overcome.
Sure.
So we'll see how the courts handle this.
Can you explain what qualified immunity is for those that don't know?
Sure.
For anybody that's going to give us a nasty comment, yes. Can you hear that?
Uh-oh.
No, it's all right.
It's not a good thing to punish, mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. When someone is on duty, right? Trying to do their best, as everyone makes mistakes in what they do. So there's a protection in the law, for police officers, that if they really didn't know the law they were dealing with or, made an error, they are covered by immunity. They can't be subject to liability.
Criminally, correct?
Or civilly, in this case, civilly. And the standard is if the cop absolutely knew what the law was at the time, knew that, this person had a specific constitutional right, for example, at the time that he was doing what he was doing, and still disregarded that, that's how you can overcome qualified immunity.
And I've heard most of the qualified immunity cases that I've heard have been, people have been protected because they followed policy. And Correct. It's actually the policy in the department that gets hung out to dry on it. Because if my policy says, hey, this is what you can do, and I do it, kind of like high-speed pursuits, right? If they say I can pursue and it meets all the standards and I pursue and somebody gets hurt, it's not coming after me. It's after the department and the policy.
Who made the policy.
Right.
Exactly.
I believe, I think this has happened. There are a few states out there that have removed qualified immunity.
Completely?
Yeah.
I thought Colorado was one.
It might be. It's, the usual states you would figure. I'm pretty sure California's on that route, which is super scary for cops. Obviously, there's two sides to it, right?
Sure.
Like the side you're dealing with, it's kind of a barrier for you. But on the same note, like if you get in a pursuit and you're doing everything by policy and by law and something happens, you're protected that way.
As well, you should be.
And you should be in those circumstances, right? Because like no cop is going to want to do the job. I wouldn't do the job if I don't have that protection.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
No, that's a vigilante.
Yeah.
Right? You just do it and then you suffer the own consequences. No.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So what other, you guys also deal with family law or what was it?
Parental
rights.
We do parental rights. Yes. Which is a really tough area legally at the moment. In other words, at federal law level, there's just not a lot of protection. I mean, when it comes down to it, parental rights are kind of hanging by a thread. And at the state level, it can be better. So the state of Idaho has some pretty decent parental rights laws. Other states do not. I mean, you mentioned California, Washington, Oregon, those types of states. So many parental rights have been stripped.
Can you give an example of what something would be?
Yeah, I mean, in schools, for example, even parental notification of how a student is behaving, either from a mental health standpoint. So that like in California and other states like it, those types of things have been mandated by state law that parents do not have a right to be notified of what their child is doing, saying, how they're acting. Are they transitioning at school? I mean, that's obviously where it's coming up a lot right now. That's a big, big problem. It's better here, definitely.
What's the mindset to come up with a law like that removes the parents from their primary job?
I think it's that they think that they know best, that they know more than the parents. It's control, right? The people, the school employees, we'll just go all encompassing. School employees are the experts, right? And they are the experts and they know what's best for that child, not the parents. The parents may be, again, these other terms, they may be hateful at home. They may be discriminatory at home, right? But we're not. We're at the school. We're school employees. We know better.
It probably began with good intentions. Maybe,
possibly.
Because there were, obviously there are a lot of parents of the people we dealt with that, are not fit to raise kids.
But you're also elevating a group of people over another. You're elevating a group of people that because they are teachers or because they're lawmakers or whatever else, that they have a better interest in your child than you do.
Yeah.
And that's a huge breakdown. I mean, where does it stop? Does it turn around and say, well, at home now you have to feed your child this. At home now your child needs to go to bed at this time because the government says so.
Right.
Like, where does that stop?
It's a very slippery slope.
Is it? And I always defer to incompetence first, right? But I can't really do that anymore because when I look at the government or the country as a whole, I'm starting to say, well, maybe there's a plan here that is beyond incompetence. Is it control? Are we just stripping away everything until the government, Big Daddy, just tells us everything?
Well, I think it's control.
I think it is too, and I deal with this with a lot of people. So I came from my parents divorced at a young age, 5 years old, and so I understand. I didn't utilize it as much, I believe, but I know I did utilize it. Is that when you're not getting along with one parent, you evacuate and go to the other. Right? There's a cup that's not being filled here. So you go over here and that one does. And then when it doesn't work over here, you jump back to the other side. And so I feel like without the responsibility that the government actually has for children, right? Like they don't house them. They don't feed them. They don't clothe them. They don't do those things. They just, they have the education side of it. Without the actual responsibility and hands-on, they can play like the grandparent, right?
Right.
Like, we don't have to tell your parents this time that we gave you candy. We don't have to tell them that you had that treat that you weren't supposed to have. And I think that almost maybe that's an underlying tone in our society is why people trust so much of the government as opposed to the people that are actually providing for them.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, there are absolutely wonderful individual people within the public school system, right? Teachers,
Totally.
administrators. So, I mean, those people are absolutely out there. They're doing a great job. But the system, itself is a different thing to talk about.
100%. This is not coming at the school teachers. That's how government works. You hide behind the people that actually care, that are the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
But if you can regulate them on what they can and can't do.
Exactly. To keep their jobs.
Right. Because you got to keep your job.
Yep.
You got to keep
Gotta
your
get
job.
that pension.
You taking advantage of good people. I mean, even high levels of government, I bet you people that are trying to come out with all sorts of things that are good. There's a way to twist it. Yeah. Right. Somebody that came up with the idea of a cell phone probably had some pretty good intentions on how cool would this be. And now we have a monitoring device that walks around with us everywhere we go, listens to everything you say. There's something that twists it at some point.
Right.
It's dark.
Anything can be twisted, probably.
Yeah. Is there hope?
Except for Seth. Seth can't be twisted.
Not physically. But Idaho is better than other places, right? In this regard?
I think so. Absolutely. We have better state law protections. I still am of the opinion that the system is still broken, probably everywhere. Yeah. When you're talking public school, I think public school system, not individuals, is broken. But that being said, compared to other places, parents have more protections here. Yes.
I removed my kids from public school years ago, and I think a lot of people up here make that same choice.
Very popular in this community.
It is. And these were some of the factors, right?
Yeah.
Like politics, all of this thing does not have a place in school.
Right.
And when you have teachers that are starting to push an agenda one way or the other, it's not okay.
Right. Yeah. It's not neutral anymore for the most part. They have a viewpoint and they expect everyone to follow it. And if you don't, you could be on the chopping block.
Yeah. So how is Idaho on discipline for your kids?
How is it on discipline?
Yeah. In terms of parental rights and disciplining your kids, I mean, 50 years ago, you could slap your kid over the face with a ruler and nobody thought any different of it.
Right.
Nowadays, you do that in California, you go to prison for 30 years. I mean, there's a difference in how you can manage your children. How's Idaho in terms of discipline on children? How does that play out?
Well, it sounds like you're kind of referring to the criminal side, which I'm not as familiar with. Okay. From like a CPS standpoint, that's certainly looked upon, by CPS as a problem.
Right.
And again, if you are a foster parent or something of that nature, totally disallowed. Right. Totally disallowed. And there are good reasons for that, depending on where these kids have come from. On the criminal side, I'm not as familiar with that.
Right.
But CPS, again, that's another probably nationwide problem, just them getting into situations they should never be entering in, investigating families for reasons they should not be investigating them. We deal with some of that. That's a growing issue as well, everywhere, including here.
Yeah. I mean, well, you ask people, you ask my dad, you ask him, if he spoke back in school, even the teachers would backhand him. Right.
That's not going on for sure.
I know that isn't, but it's funny how that changes things, right? Like when there's not that consequence of man, if I say something bad in front of grandma, like she's going to smack me. Yeah. Now it's like, I can call CPS on you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I can.
I don't want kids to get hurt, right? I mean, there's a reason that it was put in place. You don't want parents taking advantage. We have a lot of parents that take advantage of their kids. We've both seen it a ton, and it's not okay.
Sure.
Right? But then there's also, I don't know how many calls I've been on where, the kid claims like, oh, dad did this to me.
Yeah.
You talk to dad and he's like, yeah, I slapped him right across the face because he told his mom to shut up.
Yeah.
And it's like camera off and you're like, all right, this is a disciplinary thing.
Right.
This is not, this is something I'm going to step out of, right? Watch your mouth.
Yeah.
And those are tough situations. So I was interested where Idaho stands on stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What other kinds of things does the Institute take care of?
Again, we were talking a little bit about Title VII. We handle a lot of Title VII cases, which is federal employment anti-discrimination. We, in particular, do religious discrimination. So, we represent a lot of people who were fired during COVID, refusing to take be tested, those types of things. Again, who made formal objections to their employers for religious reasons that they didn't want to do any of that. We have a lot of those cases nationwide. And in other areas within Title VII, so, people requesting certain days off, even for religious purposes,
Okay.
growing amount of people
taking Christmas off.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. There you go.
Hey, Sarge. Yeah, sorry. I get I don't want to be held to that standard. It's too many rules. I don't know. I'm going to break them at some point by accident or not. So I just refuse to participate because now I break that rule and now I'm potentially criminally in trouble. Like, what did I just
and as cops too. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Yeah. I mean, what if you were in a situation as a cop and you've got, you're trying to deal with a high, alert situation and someone's telling you to use different pronouns or I'm a they, them. And I mean, how confusing for you to be dealing with that, make a report about it.
Right.
That's going to be in court potentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's part of your job.
Well,
how confusing. You can't even do your job appropriately because you're worried about pronouns.
Right.
That's not good.
You booked him under a male instead of a female.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
Sir, drop the gun. Oh, hell no.
Right.
I'm a man. Like, God damn it. Like, I don't know.
But I dealt with that. So,
Sir,
I mean,
ma'am.
but this is how fast things have changed. I mean, when I was a medic back in, I think it was 2007 or 2008, we had a guy that we would run on constantly and he would dress up like a female, right? He was a guy. I knew this because he also dropped burning water on his Johnson one day. So we had to deal with that. So this is a guy that we would go on had severe mental health issues, right? I mean, we'd go on him and he'd be wearing 28 bras and he'd have everything stuffed and he'd be talking in a female voice.
Yeah.
And there was the understanding that, you know what, this guy's got some mental health issues. Like this is not something, but he would tell me things like, I'd say, Tony, or what are we today? I'm filling out my paperwork. I'm a female. Okay. And then he'd start talking like a female. And then I'm like, okay. And then he would be like, well, what do you mean? Am I female? I said, Tony, do you have a and he'd be like, I have both. Okay. He goes, one shrivels up and becomes the other. Wow. And so, you hear this and you're like, okay, this is a person with mental health issues. Sure. This isn't normal. And then there's this change that's happening in over 20 years that you can say similar things and they're regarded as, okay, you're accepted for that.
Right.
Hold on.
And we have to ultra protect you actually.
Right.
Even more so. I mean, that's where we're at right now.
But 20 years ago, we had the foresight to go, we need to get you some help. Yeah. Now we're like, you don't need any help. It's everybody else that needs help to understand who you are.
Exactly. Well put.
That's it. That's
exactly what it is.
Officially the episode that will get us banned.
No, okay.
Sorry, it was all me.
No, that's all right. It's important.
What it is.
It is what
so
it is.
Article 7, like you said, I think this is where it comes in really important in your job is the fact that this type of stuff is now messing with people's livelihoods and everything else, where they have been a certain way and it's been okay forever, right? It's been okay to believe in this, religious freedom or turn things down or whatever else. And now they're told, you know what? Things have changed, and now what you do is inappropriate to the point that you can be fired.
Yep. And they use the term, I mean, this is happening everywhere. It's harassing, to not use someone's it's hateful, hate speech. I mean, that's another term thrown out a lot. It's discriminatory, and so they are fired on those bases, based on the employer's policy or whatever.
Right.
Just because they disagree, and that's happening a lot.
That's rough.
It's happening a lot.
I think what's really hard too is that once again, you're playing off of people that don't necessarily, when you get high enough, your job is protected as long as you enforce what they're asking you to do.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's almost like, all right, well, if I don't enforce this, then I get fired. So Seth, you're fired because you didn't do this. Right. You're putting some good people in some bad spots.
Absolutely.
And you're pitting them against each other. And I don't like it. Because it's usually not the manager that's making those decisions. It's a policy that comes down that they're presented with that here's your options. Do you want to be fired or do you want to push this forward?
It's a good point. Yeah.
It sucks.
Exactly.
Is there a turning point in this? Like, is it looking good?
Hopefully enough lawsuits have been brought, to, get employers to understand they can't just have a narrative, take a side and get away with it.
That's it, right? Taking the side. Like, I really don't care what people do in their private lives. Like,
no.
Do whatever you want as long as you're not harming someone else. I don't care.
Or as long as you're doing your job. From an employer standpoint, are you doing your job? Are you doing it well? Are you meeting all of the necessary qualifications to be in your job? I mean, that historically is what has been looked at, right? In hiring someone and retaining somebody. And again, we're seeing these employees who have had absolutely no prior issue. I mean, have absolutely no issues within their job. And they are either completely privately, or very peacefully at work, just stating their opinion that might be opposite of the majority opinion or the company's opinion,
Right.
and they are being hammered.
And it's almost like it's a forced acceptance where, you know, I tell people all the time, like, look, I have friends that are completely opposite spectrum of me, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, the big push over the past few years has been, you know, the pride flag and a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that fly that flag,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what? I've never ever thought differently of them,
Mm-hmm.
but I've also never had them put me in a position that you must agree that this is okay. Because the truth is, I'm very open with people. I say, look, that's not in my faith. I don't believe this standard, but I love you.
Right.
And I care about you. And if that's how you're going to live your life, I'm going to 100% support you.
Yeah.
You go ahead and do that. And damn the person that comes in that tries to take you down because of your beliefs or how you want to live your life. I'll stand in between anybody like that.
Yeah.
But I also am not going to have it pressed upon me to where you must also agree with how I live my life.
Right.
I had friends that smoke meth. I don't agree with it. I still love you to death, but I'm not going to come over when you're smoking meth.
And cheer for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to encourage the behavior.
Yeah.
That's not what I agree with, but I still love you the same, and you do your thing, and that's fine.
Right.
And like, to take it back to the employment thing, like if I was a cop anymore and I'm on the side of the road and I'm dealing with, and I'm looking at the license and it says female, and the person is like, call me a dude or whatever. Like, I don't give a shit. Okay. I'll call you a dude, like whatever.
Yeah. I don't care.
But I don't want to get fired over saying the wrong thing if I slip up, or I put in the report female because that's what your license says. You're a biological female.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, on scene, I don't give a damn. I'll call you whatever you want. Like, it doesn't matter to me. But yes.
But there's some people who really have a full objection to even doing that. Say this person is a female, I can't call them a male.
I call like everybody dude. So you know, so I don't really give a shit. But
right. And you know, our laws protect those people from having religious objections. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
First Amendment protects them. Title VII protects them. State laws protect them. And I think we notice that there's a hostility towards the fact that religion is protected.
Right.
A lot more than this other stuff. And
is it religion or is it Christianity?
I think it's religion. I mean, obviously our nation was founded with Judeo-Christian principles and values. There's there's no doubt about that. But religion is within the law. All religions are protected.
No, I know that
very
I'm just
broadly,
saying,
actually.
Like in general, people, I feel like there's a big, you know, it's just like seeing all the people when there's everything going on in Gaza and Israel, right? All of a sudden there's a bunch of college groups that are like, oh, Israel, like just against Israel.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, do you know where Gaza is on a map? Like if I were to pull up a map, do you know where it is? You don't have any clue? Okay. So they don't know enough.
They don't know any of the history. Or,
they don't know shit about it, but they're like, I'm going to pick it because these Jews are bad. And it's like, hold on. Are you for real? Anyways, so I feel like there's definitely an undertone that, you know, there's that expectation that white Christian, middle class, male American, those are attacked now more than anything because there's that expectation. You know what? Damn any of those people that want to put pressure on people that don't fit that narrative, don't fit that mold, right?
Yeah.
Like that shouldn't happen. That's what makes America great, is the fact that you can be heterosexual or homosexual. You can be Muslim or Christian or anything else, and you should be able to thrive without persecution over those things.
Right.
You should.
Right. And respected for your opinion.
100%.
Even in your workplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. That's probably what's wrong with the country, is now, like, we're just not doing that anymore. Like, we're not having conversations.
Exactly.
With all sides.
And that's the hardest thing. It's so crazy that when you meet somebody, like being a very conservative Republican per se versus somebody that's an extreme Democrat, it's hard to get people to come sit at the table and say, dude, let's talk about it. Like I hear
really
you completely disagree. Instead, it turns out to be a yelling thing from the other side. And then my immediate response is punch somebody in the face. So that's just.
And then you're harassing me because you disagree with me. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's that element going on too.
And if we were, man, I bet if we discussed a bunch of these things, we'd probably all find ourselves coming to the middle a little bit.
Yeah.
Because there's, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but it's hard to have those conversations nowadays.
Oh yeah.
Very hard.
Yeah. Especially when it's family.
Oh yeah.
I got that.
I had a buddy from high school that just lost his mind on me and made all these accusations. And I'm like, man, you haven't seen me in 25 years. Like, what is going on? But, you know, he lives in the Bay Area and that's his thing. And that's what he's going to go off of. And it's like, okay, well, all right. Well, have a good day. Like, you don't want to sit at the table and have the conversation.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, this has happened to me multiple times. They take snippets of a conversation. This happens like once a month for me. I'll have a family member reach out and like it blow up on me through messaging of some type about something we talked about here, but they're not listening to the whole hour. They're watching a 30-second clip.
Oh yeah.
And they see this section where I say, I don't respond to emails with and they think I'm an awful person. But like in reality, I love everybody. I just don't want to play that game.
There's no reason to. And that's kind of one of the things with, especially, you know, you talk about private entity, goodness, is being able to make that choice. Like, you know, I love seeing the signs that say we reserve the right to refuse business service to anybody.
Sure.
Okay. Well, some people get offended like that. Whoa, what?
Yeah.
Well, why not? I reserve the right at my house, right? To who comes in, who doesn't, how do we do it? Don't ring my doorbell.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. I don't have to invite you into my house.
Right.
You know,
So
I get that choice.
It's the same thing.
As a property owner.
Yeah. When you're providing a service to somebody, well, somebody's not going to be respectful. If somebody's going to cause issues, if they're going to walk in and say, well, I want to eat here, but you have to follow my rules. Well, no, you can leave.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
It's that simple.
There's other places to eat.
Yeah.
What other hot topics are you working on?
Well, we were talking a little bit about the hate crime issue, you know, and City of Coeur d'Alene recently passed a local ordinance, you know, identifying hate crimes and the punishment thereof. Got a lot of questions about that and, you know, whether or not that implicates First Amendment, you know, free speech, free expression rights. And it's a very interesting question. You know, the answer is a bit complicated. The answer is maybe, you know, depending on how that is applied, it absolutely could be. And I mean, we generally oppose hate crimes for a bunch of different reasons, right? I mean, just you guys are cops. From a justice standpoint, why would it matter? I mean, a crime is a crime. You know, if a crime has been committed and there's a victim of that crime, why should, you know, certain victims get, you know, better outcomes essentially on justice from a justice standpoint, just because of who they are or what they look like, right? So it doesn't make sense, you know, for that reason. And there's just a growing, I guess, acceptance of, you know, these hate incidences and hate bias and hate speech, which is, by the way, not a thing, right? Hate speech is protected speech. But those terms are being thrown out and thrown out and thrown out, and it's confusing, right, to people. And that just, it's, you know, we're creeping towards punishment for having a certain type of expression, right? And so, you know, locally, City of Coeur d'Alene, you know, as written, you know, is it a concern, you know, that we have this ordinance? Don't think it directly implicates First Amendment free speech rights, but how is it going to be applied, right? We don't know yet. Something to look out for.
Why did they feel like they needed that? Is there not a state? I don't know. I've never dealt with a hate crime, but is there no state law already? There
isn't at the state level. There is federally. And I just think it's a statement that they're trying to make. You know, there've been
looking something up while we're doing this.
Incidences, you know, locally that have people concerned, you know, there was, you know, racist comments, you know, things like that. Right. Which, you know, don't advocate for that. Right. You know, definitely don't advocate for that. But a crime is a crime. Right. And that should be dealt with like every other crime. And I think once we start delineating, it just has, you know, we should sound the alarm on how that's going to be applied.
Yeah. Is the bigger issue like using words against someone? Or because I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. Like if dirtbag targets this person because of the color of their skin and murders them or something. Like,
right.
Okay, maybe like, that's a hate crime. Is it?
Yeah, but it's a crime, right? I mean, a murder is a murder.
Is it an enhanced crime because of the
be
reason? Maybe
it can be, yeah, because they did that for a racial reason,
right? But if they're throwing words out,
yeah,
is that part of the new ordinance? Where that would be a crime?
That's what people are concerned about. That words alone would somehow implicate criminal activity, right? Versus it being a crime, no matter. So, for example, you go destroy someone's private property. For example, okay, that's a crime in and of itself. And then on that private property, you say, some racial slur or, some sexual slur or something like that to indicate that, oh, that's why you committed that crime against that person. That can have an enhanced penalty versus just destroying property is a crime in and of itself.
Yeah. The risk is if the goalpost keeps getting moved, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
How do you know?
Yeah.
It gets too confusing.
It's confusing. It's definitely confusing. And again, this is new, so we don't know how it may be applied.
And this is a city code.
Correct. City of Coeur d'Alene.
Okay. Because I know the state, because I remember I was going back. So Title 18, Chapter 79 is malicious harassment, but obviously not as specific as something else. I mean, it says basically it's unlawful for any person maliciously and with the specific intent to intimidate or harass another person because of person's race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin.
Yeah.
Now, we obviously have a lot more than that now.
Right.
I mean, sexual orientation isn't included. That's a hot topic one, right?
Well, in Idaho, state laws, generally speaking, do not include that as a quote protected class yet. There's obviously been attempts to include that gender identity also. So generally speaking, that is not in our state codes, our state anti-discrimination codes, I should say. Which again, I think that'll be attempted every year until it gets in there. But
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with the fact that you shouldn't be like, there should be a crime for maliciously coming at somebody, whether it's slander, hate speech, whatever it is. Hate speech doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But going after somebody for something like that because of your sexual orientation or anything else, I don't feel like that should be, it's one thing to say, well, I'm not going to call you that pronoun, whatever.
Yeah.
But to go after somebody.
Here's the problem.
Those things.
When does it become a problem? When does that become encompassed?
Right.
And now it is hate speech because you dead name someone or use the wrong.
No, absolutely.
That's where I get nervous because the goalpost can move wherever.
Oh, totally.
Right.
On
face value,
speech alone is different than speech on top of something that would be a crime no matter what.
Right.
Yeah. Assault or whatever.
Speech alone is what we're talking. We don't want the regulation of speech in and of itself or expression, however that may be. Right.
Well, I mean, Idaho has a code, right? We're the first state to pass the legal definition of a man and a woman. So I don't know if, this is all attorney lawyer stuff where you go around, well, if somebody says, no, I'm a woman or I'm whatever, I'm a cat. And you're like, no, you're a female. There's two definitions here in the state. Like, can that be something that's protected? I don't know.
That's scary stuff.
It is, like you said, the goalpost moves, and I think that's what's so hard, especially for law enforcement or for anybody really. Like, especially if the intent isn't there. Right. Intent's huge, obviously, in law, intent is huge, but a lot of times intent gets pushed that you meant to disrupt this person, you meant to do these things to him, and that's tough.
I feel like a lot of these problems can be solved by the court of public opinion and the community, right? If you have one asshole that's running around calling people whatever, the rest of the community can be like, nah, dude.
Right. Yeah.
Like, no. It doesn't even need to get physical, but I think that it can be, done in a way where like that is just not okay. Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's doable. And I feel like putting these things in the hands of the government is a dangerous road to go down.
I agree. And I mean, the vast majority of people agree with the intent, right? I mean, we don't think anyone should be called those names, right? Because of the color of their skin or whatever it may be, right? But that, like you said, that doesn't mean the government should get involved with it and punish that over and above, other crimes
Right.
necessarily.
Well, how archaic is that to hate somebody because they're different? Like, honestly, like how archaic is it to walk up and be like, you know what, you're different than me and I don't like you.
Yeah. It's stupid.
What?
Right.
It's
I know.
In the world?
Yeah.
It felt like less of a thing in the 80s and 90s when I grew up than it does now.
70s
unfortunately,
too?
I feel like no, I'm not that old.
Oh.
Close. I feel like we've taken a step back in time with that. And I think that's,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's by design or what,
Right.
to create chaos. I don't know, but it feels like it and sucks.
Does that go back to schools and what they're teaching? I mean, are they teaching division or not? Either intentionally or unintentionally.
Right.
I mean, is that breeding division somehow? Right?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
critical race theory. I don't actually even know that much about that, but I hear that term. It's just hard when, when you're celebrating things that are outside of the norm and they become so prominent, you know what I mean? That you're like, man, this is different. It's hard because, as a white male, I remember being told in college. So this blew my mind because I was very, very much an activist when I was in college. Okay. And I remember there was a people of color graduation and I was involved in a fraternity that was all about diversity. Yeah. And it was phenomenal, right? Like it was super cool. I love the premise of it. Amazing guys that I was in there with. And I remember signing up. I was like, oh, we're going to have the people of color graduation. The whole premise of it was to celebrate diversity and the differences between us. And I went to go sign up and they said no. And I said, what? And they're like, yeah, no, this is for people, different ethnicities. I'm like, different than what? Yeah. Different than
what's the baseline?
Different. Yeah. What exactly are we citing that makes it to where I can't? And it was like, say it.
Yeah. Wow.
Tell me what it is. And that was rough for me because I'm like, wait a minute. I sold this whole bill because I want people to feel equal and feel included, right? Especially, race has always been a division worldwide, all over. I mean, it always will be, right? It's so easy to identify somebody as looking different than you. And I'm like, that's shit. So I fought against that. And then to be told like, oh, because of something that you can't change, you are not included in this. We're going to celebrate everything else. And I'm like, and it's because you're always celebrated. And I'm like, man, I sure don't feel celebrated now. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like inclusiveness is a huge thing. And I don't think I've never tried to put my foot down and say, well, you're not included because of this. Right. It's like, now if you're going to come into my house and you want to give a speech on why we're living the wrong way, well, we're going to have a problem. Right. It's a little different.
I never knew you were a frat boy, dude.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was fun. I still never drank either.
Weird.
Not one drop of alcohol all the way through college.
So boring.
Everybody loved me because I was a sober host every time they had a party. Like, oh, cool. Everybody else would drink.
Things you've seen.
Not that anybody drank under 21.
Of course not.
At all. But after the fact.
Like,
that doesn't happen. So yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Well, we're going to light some stuff up on this podcast.
Might be the end, folks. It's a good ride.
Yeah.
It's a good ride. I think we should call it, but I feel like we should do this every 6 months or so and refresh because these topics need to get talked about.
Update on cases and what we're doing.
Super important.
Yeah. I feel like new case law is so important. People don't understand what case law means. Right. And so when there's landmark things, like we'd want to be kept up to date too, because that's important, I think. Sure. And like I said, it's such a sensitive topic that we're talking about today. It really is. You can offend a lot of people. I'm sure our clips will. Oh yeah. We'll get some comments. Maybe we'll get booted. I don't know. But is there a way that people can support the Pacific Justice Institute? Like, it's a nonprofit, so donations?
It is, sure. Our website is pji.org. Okay. And so anyone can go there, see a lot of our work posted there and get a hold of us if you need help, of course, if you need legal help. And again, I'm the person in Idaho, so you'd be connected with me. Cool. Feel free. And then you're focusing once again on First Amendment rights, Title VII, and parental rights. Yeah. So religious freedom, free speech, parental rights is kind of our main. Awesome. Yeah.
As we see what's going on in Great Britain, we know how important this is because that shit's crazy over there.
Yeah.
I didn't even know.
Oh, they're just people are getting arrested for social media posts.
Yeah. Really?
Yes.
No way.
They don't have the First Amendment. or the second.
That's crazy.
And the first protects the second.
Boom. Cool. Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me. I really
Great
appreciate
conversation. Thanks, Kate.
it. Thank you.
All right. See you.